So with our selection tool, again, we can move it around. With our direct selection tool, we can move it around. But what we can do, as I told you yesterday with the direct selection tool, we can round off the corners like that. And that's pretty cool. But let's say you want to scale it down. You want to change the size of it. Well, there's a couple of different ways to do it. And one way, and I guess the more accurate way, is under here. Oh, and by the way, make sure that you go Window, Workspace, and we're just working in the Essentials right now. So if you set Essentials, it's going to slap everything back, or if you go Window, Workspace, Reset Essentials, it'll put everything back. I already did that this morning, so that everything is kind of in order. So underneath the shear tool, which I showed you yesterday to give us this italicized font, if we click and hold down, there is a scale tool. So if I grab the scale tool, we can change the size of this. But like in other applications, if we don't hold down the Shift key, we can like mess it up. So what we want to do, if you do want to scale it in proportion, you just hold down the Shift key while you drag the scale tool. Okay. Now the other way to do it is to double click the scale tool. And by double clicking it, and most of these kind of tool things, if you double click, it opens up some kind of a window that gives you options on what to do. So you can tell it to uniformly scale it to 50%. So, and I'm going to turn these things off because I want to show you this. So I'm going to scale it to 50%. Well, actually, let's make it more dramatic. Let's make it 30%. So it's going to be 30% of the size. Now, do you see what happened? I'm going to copy and paste. This is our original, and this is the one we want to scale down to 30%. So I'm going to scale it, double click it, scale it to 30%, and say OK. If you can tell, it did not, I mean, it did make the overall size 30%, but the stroke around the outside is still the same width, right? So it did not scale it, truly scale it like you would want to. So what you have to do is when you do that numeric scale, when you double click on the scale tool, right here it says scale corners. Now we don't have any corners, but you usually want to scale the corners. And then we want to scale the strokes and effects. So now if I see 30%, and there's a preview button, if I click on that, it actually does scale it all together. Okay, it scales it in proportion to this. So this line weight, the stroke here, is actually 30% of this stroke weight, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that and move this out of the way. So let's say, for example, you did your thumbnails and you drew something, and now you want to create an Illustrator graphic of that thumbnail. Well, you can actually bring it in to your document and use it for tracing. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the layers palette over here. So you see that on my layers palette, I have like all this stuff. One thing that's interesting in Illustrator is if I turn the visibility off on this layer, it like wipes out kind of like everything, because that's like my base layer, my layer 1. So we can do a couple things. Like, let's just say I don't want to mess with any of these things right here. I can just leave them off to the side and create a new layer. And I can lock, by clicking right next to the eyeball, I can lock layer 1. And that means when I click on this layer, no matter what I do, I can't click on anything. I can't do anything, nor can I draw on this layer. So that's one way to save it pretty nicely. You can also turn that off. So the visibility is off, but it's locked, it's still there. So what I want to do is I have a sketch, and if you took a picture of your thumbnails, if you scanned it in, if you took a picture of your cell phone and emailed it to yourself, and now I have it in my Windows Virtual Desktop environment, I want to place that sketch. So I'm going to go File, Place. And here's my sketch. and I'm going to place it in. Now, when I said file place, it loads up my cursor. You can see that it's telling me, hey, we got something. Where do you want to put it? And I'm going to click down right here. And there's my image. Now, I can scale it down by grabbing my scale tool, holding down the shift key. And what I want to do is I want to trace over this. And you'll see that I placed it on layer 2. Now, by double clicking this layer, by double clicking layer 2, it gives me some options for this layer. And one of the options is like, it tells you what color that layer will be represented by. In this case, light red, but I could change it to light blue or whatever. But also I can make it a template layer because I'm going to use it to draw on. So I'm going to say template, and automatically you'll see this. Automatically it locks it. It shows it so that you can see it, because obviously if you're going to use it to trace, you want it to be that way. And automatically it's going to dim the image. So this is what it looks like at 100%. But you know that if you're going to be tracing over something, you might want to have it a little lighter in the background so that it doesn't affect what you're seeing. So I'm going to say, oh, well, and actually I can call it art, arty, so I can change it to art. And I can say, okay. So you see how it looks different now? And my pencil, I can't do anything on this layer because it's locked. There's my art layer. So what I now do is I create another layer by just coming to the Create New Layer tab. And now this is the layer that I can draw on, and it's not going to affect my artwork. So let's explore a couple of the tools that we may want to use in Illustrator. Is with my pen tool, I'm going to try to trace this line right here. So I'm going to set this down, and there's a couple of different ways that I can do it. The one way you don't want to do a fluid line is to do this. Now I'm gonna say it out loud while I'm doing it, but obviously you wouldn't. I just want you to know what I'm doing, so it might be hard for you to see. So if I were to go click, click like I'm pushing down, click, 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 like this. Yeah, I'm tracing it, but it's going to look very Minecraft and very 8-bit, right? Because it's jagged. I'm going straight line to straight line to straight line to straight line. That is not how you want to trace something in Illustrator, unless you are trying to create straight lines. So one thing that you'll notice is when I'm using this pen tool, no matter what I do, it stays. Like it thinks that I want to make another point, okay? So to stop that, one way that I can do it is I can come up to select and go to deselect, and it's telling me the keyboard shortcut is Command-Shift-A, and you may have to test that or on your Chromebook, but remember the keyboard shortcuts are right here. So I'm going to hit this deselect, and now I'm done. And you can see that's not really good looking as far as like the tracing. And this is the single biggest problem that people have in Illustrator, is tracing like this. So I'm going to move this to the side. So what you want to think about when you're drawing in Illustrator is you want to make the shape that you're trying to draw with as few points as possible. As you can see here, there's a lot of points on this line, and each one of these points is, causing a problem, really. So I want to try to do something fluid. So I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I'm going to click down. Now, technically, the nose is a little rounded right here, but I'm just going to start right here. So it looks to me like there's one big arc right here. So if I click down and make one point here and maybe one point here, and I click and drag, and you should be able to see that. I'm looking on my, that adds, so now instead of 50 points, I've made this arc with 2 points. But here's the key, and I'm looking on my iPad to make sure you guys can see it. So because it's all math, because it's vector-based, Illustrator is predicting the arc of my next point based upon my previous point. So in other words, because this is like a really big arc that I just did, okay, Illustrator is thinking, well, you want to make a smooth point, you want to make a smooth transition to the next one. So no matter what, like let's say if I tried to click a point right here, it's going to do that. It's going to spin out and swing out because it's still seeing that last point. Now I can edit undo or Command Z, same edit undo as in every program pretty much. And if I don't, like it would be really nice if I wanted to do this, right? That would make a nice smooth arc, but I don't want to do that. I want to switch into this direction. So what you do to get rid of Illustrator doing this for you is you can reset to the last point by clicking on the last point, and that clears it. But watch this. Remember, this is really fluid. This drawing is really fluid. So instead of ending it, what if I here and come all the way up to here, which would be like the next point. Now I've made this whole thing in 1, 2, 3 points, okay? And since it kind of was a smooth transition, if I come here, I can click and drag, and I can come here and click, and now you'll see that it's straight because I know that I'm going to click and drag like this. And I'm going to come this way. Now you look, if I tried to put a point here, he's going to have like a little protuberance on his fish body, or their fish body, sorry. But if I drag it down to the natural progression of this curve, yeah, it's not too bad. That's pretty close. So, and I'm going to go select, deselect, and so now you can really see the difference between like this and something like this. So this is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points, and I've got basically almost the whole body. Now, I'm going to zoom in right here. This nose is kind of rounded, right? Well, the neat thing is I've gotten my body done and everything, but I can grab my pen tool and, well, I'm going to show, because this will happen to you. So if I grab my pen tool and come right here, I can join on that same line. And I'm going to round this nose a little bit and come here. And actually, I'm going to undo that because I think what I probably should have done is come all the way to here. And then I can come here, click and drag. Now, watch closely what I'm about to do, because this isn't going to help me. That is not what I want that to look like, right? There's nothing I can do. It's curved in that direction. There's nothing I can do. So what I need to do, I can't use that. I need to click exactly, directly on that last point, and that will reset my pen. And now I can do this. Oh, and even that doesn't work. I was too much of an arc, so I'm going to have to reset again. Click and reset, and then come this way. And then click and reset. I wonder if this will work. Let's see. All right, and I'm going to hit Command-Shift-A or deselect. And now we've pretty much got that fish body going, okay? Everything else is going to be really, really easy. So let's take a look at another tool that we can use. So that's the pen tool. And by the way, the beauty of the pen tool is that I can come back here with my direct selection tool. And if I wanted to, I can click on this point and I can edit it. I can move the point. And I can grab these little handles and I can pull it. Or I can pull it. I can do whatever I want to do. And the beauty of it is I can undo this and say, man, I really messed up. Let me go back to the way it should be. All right. So that's the pen tool. One thing that you'll notice with your stroke is right now, it's got kind of a flat edge right there. So if you go to Window, Stroke, and you hit the little pancake menu, which gives you more options. Number one, I can make my stroke, well, I have to select it first. So I'm going to select it with my selection tool. I can make my stroke thicker. And I can also change the way that stroke ends. If I don't want a flat end or a sharp corner, I can make it rounded, and I can make it rounded. So that's really cool. Now there's one other tool that I want to show you when dealing with lines and strokes. And this only works, what I'm about to show you only works when you have created this line with the pen tool. All right. So there is a tool called the width tool, and I'm going to highlight it and take a screenshot. So it is the width tool, width, right? And one of the things in illustration, one of the things that is in animation is what we call a variegated line. Those of you that have had art class or more advanced art classes know that means when a line goes from thick to thin to thick, right? Instead of being one weight. Like right now, this is all one weight. It's all 3-point. But if we use the width tool on this line, so the width tool looks kind of like this weird blobby alien from another dimension thing, right? So if I grab this width tool and come to any point on my line, and I'm going to zoom in just so you can see it better. Now, if this is the fish head, right, I would probably want the line to be thinner on this side and thicker on the bottom. Thinner on the top, thicker on the bottom. So watch what happens when I have my width tool and I get close to the line. Okay, you see that point that's tracing along there? That will be an edit point. And I can click on the stroke and I can adjust the weight and I can make it thinner here or thicker. So let's make it thinner. So now you can kind of see that it is thinner there and thicker here. Well, maybe I want this underside of the body to be even thicker. So I can grab my width tool, I can come to this point, and I can fatten it up. And now it's starting to look like I did it with like a brush, with like an ink brush or something like that. That's the width tool. All right. So you've learned the pen tool and the width tool. So let's do this tail real quick. So if I don't want to use the pen tool, I can use the paintbrush tool. And with the paintbrush tool, and I'm just going to do a few marks over here, you'll see that, you know, it gives you, if you're not using like a tablet, if you're not using something pressure sensitive, it just gives you a standard size. And so what you can do is you can lower, I think you can see it right there, or it's going to be like right here. You can lower the weight under the stroke. You can raise it or whatever. So there's 20.25 point. Let's go with, I'm going to go with 0.2. I'm going to type in my own. Now let's go with 0.15. I'm going to go with my own number, not the standard numbers. Okay. And you know what the cool thing is? If I grab these strokes that I did earlier, I can change them because it's not Photoshop. I didn't draw it with pixels. I can make it whatever I want. I can flatten the ends if I want to. So let's go ahead and let's come back here to the brush and make it 0.15. And now I can draw. Now I realize I'm on a Wacom Cintiq. I know it's easier for me because I can actually use my pen, and many of you are just going to be stuck with the mouse. I know that. So what I'm going to do is, now I can take this stroke, I can make it wider. Take this stroke, make it wider, or something like that. And I can come in here. Actually, I probably want to make this a little wider because it's the outline, right? I can come in here to this point, grab my direct selection tool, click on this point, and move it until it matches better with that. I can come over here. Actually, this side's not so bad. I'm going to leave that as is. But let's just say I want to keep, if I wanted to move this point, I can do that. And that's the beauty of it not being pixel-based, not being in Photoshop. Okay, and then I can draw. Last thing I'm going to show you, because we've got that, let's draw, let's do this eye. So now you've got the pen tool, you've got the brush tool. So let's draw the eye. I'm going to come over here to my shapes. I'm going to grab an ellipse, and I'm going to draw an ellipse for the eye. I'm going to increase the weight, and I'm going to use my direct selection tool. I'm sorry, my selection tool. And I'm going to, underneath the scale tool that I showed you earlier, there is the rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate it. And I'm going to move it where I want it to be. And what's really cool, because it's made with a line, I can grab my width tool and I can adjust it so that it looks like that. I just changed the width on one section. So let's take a look. What I often do when I'm tracing something is I will turn off the visibility of the traced layer and check it out. So that's actually coming along quite nicely. And one last thing that I'm going to show you, because you're probably going to want to do this. So you'll see that I've got these like lines around the eye, kind of like, you know, the parentheses kind of things. So what if I do this? What if I copy and paste this to make the line around the eyes? And I scale it up a little bit, make it a little wider. And let's say I want to use that. Actually, that didn't look too bad right there. But I want to, let's say I want to erase part of this. So I'm going to move this up here, make a copy. Illustrator does have an eraser. So if I grab the eraser tool, I should, right, be able to erase the parts that I don't want. So, and if I were to continue on, erase all this. Well, that's not what I was expecting, right? And if I move this up here, because Illustrator sees this as like a shape, and it thinks that you are erasing away part of the shape. So it did cut it. It did cut it in half, but it still has like this outline right here. So one way that you can get around that, and this is pretty pretty cool. Well, there's actually a couple of ways. So I'm going to make 2 copies and I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. Number 1, underneath the eraser is the scissors tool. And if you click on a point on the line, like say there, I'm sorry, I have to zoom in a little bit so that I can see it. You have to click right on that line. And now I clicked there, and it has separated it. So now I've got this. But remember, I used the width tool, so that's why it's flaring out right there. So I could grab the width tool and I can shrink that in. And I can grab the width tool here and shrink that in. So, and I could use that. And of course I could grab the width tool and, whoops. Shrink it down and then move it. And then I've got that. So that's one way to do it. That was using the scissors tool, which is underneath the eraser tool. And that works with anything. So let's just say, for example, if you drew this stroke right here. All right, you'll also see that I was able to stop it from drawing by grabbing my selection tool. That's the other way. One way is to go object or select, deselect. Another way is to grab it, like when you're done drawing, and just come here and select another tool and it'll stop. So let's grab the eraser tool and let's see what happens if I try to erase right here. That's no problem, right? Because there's no fill and it's not a closed shape. But if I grab my scissors tool, I can cut here. It's giving me that error because my screen isn't calibrated right. So, but anyways, that's good enough. And so I moved it into different chunks. So using the scissors tool, using that, the eraser tool does work. The eraser tool will cut something. The scissors tool will cut something. The other way to do it, which is a little more complicated, and you will eventually want to do this, so if you want to follow along, you don't have to do it this way. Right now, Illustrator sees this as a stroke that is this wide on this part and this wide on this part. Well, if I go Object, Expand Appearance, when I say Object, Expand Appearance, it is not going to be a stroke anymore. When I do this, it's not going to be, I can't adjust the point size, I can't adjust anything anymore. Because what it's going to do is it is now not a line, it is a shape that's together. So let's see what happens if I try to erase now. I am able to cut. I'd have to use my direct selection tool though to separate it, and I can go edit, cut, edit, paste, and now it's its own thing. That's just a little more complicated to do it that way. But it works and it's fine. And by the way, it's a shape, so I can grab my direct selection tool and I can edit individual points if I want to. Okay. Well, I've made a big mess. So, does anybody have any questions on any of this stuff?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to color, is there like a multiply layer option or something so you don't color the outline?
Okay, coloring is very different in Illustrator. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to color this body, right? Remember I have the stroke and the fill. So for example, if I open up my window, swatches, and it gives me my basic colors over here. So I'm just going to use some basic colors. So if I drag a color to the fill, it's going to fill it in like that. So it does, that is pretty cool. And like with this eye, it has no fill. If I drag white to the fill, I can do that. And so for example, let's just say, and I'm going to do this real quick. Let's just say I wanted to put some stripes on this fish. You know, that's a common misconception that clownfish are funnier than any other fish. So I can change the color of the stroke to white, right? But that's not looking good. You know, it's overlapping the black. So, but let's just say I grabbed, oh, this is actually a good thing to show you. So let's say I want to make this one big white stripe right here. Love the white stripes, they're awesome. So I can come here, grab my pen tool, and I might be able to come over this way, and I might be able to come over this way. And let's just say I do this. And I close this off. I'm going to get rid of this black line right here. So I've got, this shape has a white stroke and no fill. If I flip it around now, it's got like a white fill and no stroke. But what I may want to do, because let's just say, for example, I don't want it to overlap the black, I could copy and paste the black, have it have no fill. Now it's on top, and I can move it on top of it so that we have this kind of effect right here. But you are going to have some issues with coloring. But the other thing that's kind of cool is because it's like Illustrator, you know, and it's a lot easier to do like layers and everything. And yes, to a certain extent, you can, like I could take this, and there is a tab right here next to stroke called transparency, and I can reduce the opacity of it if I wanted to, and I can make it look something like that, right? And you can adjust colors that way. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things that you can do. Generally speaking, like for example, if I were going to draw this fin over here, and I'm just going to do it real quick, I would probably, because here's my art layer, I can now turn this layer off or keep it on, but I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to draw this fin. All right, so there's my fins. Now, if I were to pull a color into this fin, you see how it just kind of like chopped it right across because I didn't make, it's not a full fluid shape that's closed off. It just went from there to there. But the cool thing is, wrong way, I can take this fin, move it like right here, and because it's under this layer, it's like hidden under there. So I can use the layers to my effect, just like I'm going to move this up. And there it is. Hey, it's a rooster fish. So we can do it that way. Or, so if you look, see that this, and I'll just put a different color in. So this is on top, but I could click on this layer with that fin and move it under layer 3, which has the body. And now it's hidden behind there, if that makes sense. Any other questions on that? Does that make sense? I see a lobster shaking their head. So just like anything else, just like Photoshop, you can adjust the layers. Also, look, I can click and drag and drop the fill, right here, drop it in there, change the colors. And if I wanted to, if I want to continue this shape, I can come here. And again, because it is on a different layer, it's under this layer. That's why it looks like that. And again, I can turn this off and we can see what it looks like. Does that make sense to everybody?